Okay, so welcome. We have Sylvia Acevedo who can introduce herself. Sylvia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm really excited to be here. I'm Sylvia Acevedo, and it's great to be part of this webinar. Really hopeful to provide great advice for up and coming women executives.
Excellent, thank you, Sylvia. And Mary Olingsise, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your position at Alliant?
So I'm Mary Ling Sisay, and I'm Vice President for Student Affairs Policy Assurance, and I'm also Dean of Undergraduate Studies. And I am also really excited to engage in this conversation as we continue to explore issues of leadership for women. Thank you.
That's terrific. And my name is Louise Kelly, and I am the founder of CIWL, which is the Center for Innovation for Women Leadership, and that is based here at Alliant International University. We're here in the San Diego campus. And Mary and Sylvia and also Liz Fetter, who will be joining us shortly, are all on the board, the executive board, so they're really responsible for shaping the strategy of our center. And really the center is about supporting women leadership and models that are compatible with women leadership, really on a global scale in a lot of different contexts. And this is our first webinar, so we're kind of kicking things off with this webinar. And the idea of this today is really like a kind of, I would describe it almost like a fireside chat. We don't actually have the fireside, but that we're just kind of informally kind of looking at how does it really work. And it's really, today, it's really based on experience, and the people that we're interviewing here, Sylvia and Mary and also Liz Fetter, who will be joining us, are all very experienced executive women and who have seen it in a lot of different contexts. So, and Sylvia, could you tell us a little bit about the work that you do with the White House Commission on Hispanics? Could you mention a little bit about that before we get started?
Oh yeah, no problem at all. You know, I'm an engineer by training, and after I finished working as a career in technology, I realized that in education there's amazing capabilities on one or one-on-few, but systems thinking isn't really the forte of a lot of educators. And as an engineer, my systems engineering expertise really came in handy. There was a really nice fit between educational needs, changing demographics, and my expertise. With that, and being able to rely on my experience in technology, I was able to really do some innovative work in terms of mobilization, reaching people, helping communities adapt demographic changes. And I did that throughout the country, and that got me noticed by the White House. And then I was invited to be a White House Commissioner for Educational Excellence for Hispanics. And that's just been an amazing opportunity to see things at the national level, but also to really use that opportunity to make a difference. And I've really been focused on what are the types of things that you can do that really move the needle, make a difference. And I'm really excited about that opportunity that I've had.
Terrific. Thank you so much for that. And with that, we will jump into our topic today, which we're looking at. It's interesting. I had the chance to speak with one of the foremost researchers on women leadership, which is that is Alice Eagly, who is at Northwestern University. She's a social psychologist, and she's been doing research on this for about 30 years. And she has a lot of findings which are surprising, sometimes disturbing. Some of her work really suggests that the default in people's perception is the male leader is really our, and that's something that's why we started this center, so we can have conversations about that. And one of the things that when I spoke with Alice a couple of months ago on the phone, I said to her, Alice, what is the number one thing that this center should be doing for women that would really help to move the needle forward in terms of women in leadership positions? And her answer was interesting. She said, the number one thing is for you to teach women how to speak up charismatically in meetings, and executive meetings, board meetings, managerial meetings, presentations. We see it in politics. We see it, that ability to get your point of view across in a meeting can be challenging for a lot of women. And so I wanted to open that up to Sylvia and Mary to, what has your experience been with that? And what are some of your thoughts that would be good advice or ways to help women on that?
Sylvia, I'll let you go first.
Okay, no problem at all. That is exactly one of the key issues. A lot of times when women enter a meeting, for example, a business meeting, they'll look around the room and they'll think, okay, there's about 10 people here. Let's make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to provide their perspective. And they'll kind of hold back, or if they've got a lot of expertise on a topic, they'll only provide a little bit of it because they don't want to hog too much airtime, thinking that they're taking time away from somebody else. A man enters a room who has expertise, and he thinks, oh, I've got a lot of expertise. He'll keep talking until he doesn't want to talk or somebody interrupts him. And he doesn't look around the room and said, oh, there's 10 people. I got to make sure everybody's got a chance to talk. It's kind of like he's got the ball and he'll keep using the conversation ball until it's wrested away from him. And that's a very different way of approaching a meeting. So even if a man may not have the most expertise or as much expertise as a woman, he will present himself as if he has that much expertise and just continue to talk. So I think for a lot of women, that makes them really uncomfortable because they feel like they have to share the time with other people, even if they have the most expertise. So you've got to be able to be comfortable. If you're the expert, you've got a point of view, you've got to be able to share it. The other thing is really being focused and concise instead of trying to talk about everything at one time. Really focus on one or two key points and really drill on those points so that people have something to remember. The other thing is really the importance of the pre-meeting. That's the other thing. A lot of women go into a meeting thinking that the meeting is going to happen where the decisions are made. Most men figure out with the guy who's running, the person running the meeting, what the meeting's about, what the boss is going to say, and then they will act appropriately. I've seen so many women go into meetings and just think it's an open opportunity to share your thoughts. And they may be providing a perspective that is diametrically opposed to what the boss has already sort of signaled that he or she is going to decide. And I think a lot of women are very novice in that and don't realize the importance of the pre-meetings before you actually go to the meeting. Most women try to be really efficient and think, what a waste of time. I'd rather just go to the meeting and make it happen then. And that's pretty much, that doesn't work very well.
I want to jump in on that for 1 minute because I really love what you're saying, Sylvia. You brought up a lot of interesting things, but the pre-meeting, I wanted to pick up on that because that is something that took me a while to understand. And, one of the things that I learned is when I had an initiative that I wanted to get support for, naively at first, I kind of went the way Sylvia is describing, where I thought, well, I'll go in the meeting, I'll make my best case, I'll win the day by logic or whatever. I'm being well prepared, and it's absolutely not the case because often people just need time to absorb something. And so one thing I've learned, which is a little uncomfortable, but I do it, is to ask for people's support. And so I will go to people one-on-one and have that one-on-one conversation. And then it's almost like you're closing the deal where you say, can I count on your support? Can I have your vote? And, people can say yes or no. And I think it really is, an existential moment to ask that, to say, can I have your support? Can I have your vote? But I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, meetings are kind of theater, and the work is usually done behind the scenes, and that took me a long time to understand. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and I want to echo that. So the L word, lobbying, is kind of taboo for women because women don't feel like they can lobby people to join their positions. And oftentimes, that pre-meeting is critically important. Even in instances where, the people you're speaking to in the one-on-one are not necessarily in alignment, I find that the pre-meeting, one, is either going to bring them into alignment or is going to help you further develop the idea that you have, because there are going to be questions that are going to be posed that maybe you didn't think about. And so it will refine your idea even better, so that by the time you get to prime time, you have a very solid and focused vision or position to present to the group. So lobbying is, I know it's a political word, and a lot of women shy away, from anything that resembles remotely anything that suggests they're being political. But women need to be political.
Very interesting. Um, and one of the things I think about as a hallmark of women leadership is conversations, and rather than telling people, having that back and forth. And so that preparation before the meeting also gives you a chance to have those conversations, to hear the other perspective, to digest it in a context where you're not sort of grandstanding or proving a point. So I think that's very important. So can you give me an example, either of you, an example in, let's say, the last 2 months of where you were in a meeting and you were able to overcome an obstacle, or there was something that was difficult for you and you were able to take a strategy to overcome that. So any examples that you could give? Doesn't have to be names, but situations where you were in a meeting. I know Mary, for example, is in meetings all day, and Sylvia was just on an executive board meeting before this. So can you give us some examples of where you saw that in action?
Yes, we were soliciting different inputs, and somebody was trying to hijack the meeting from a different perspective. And this particular individual would not give up the mic, and because it was a very large meeting, and I was near another mic, and I tried really to sort of say, we need to wrap up, and they had the mic and they just kept going. And I know sometimes those can be very political issues. So I decided to use a little humor. And I said, oh, this is like the Academy Awards. The music has begun to play. And this person continued to keep talking. And so then I said, and the music is playing a little louder. And at that point, the crowd kind of was beginning to chuckle and to get on my side, to let this person, you started to feel like, yeah, that person had the mic a little too long. And so then I said, and then all they needed to see was me going up to the mic, and they said, okay, I'll wrap up. And that allowed me to get back control of the meeting, and in a way that had a little bit of humor, but still got the meeting going.
Excellent. I want to pick up on that, but I just want to say I see our viewers coming online. And so please, those who are viewing, if you want to write some in the chat, write some of your questions, we can address those and go into those. So Sylvia, I want to pick up on your point as well. Humor is something that is really something that, from my observation, that it's almost sometimes a male privilege in a meeting to relax and use humor. And it's something that is so effective. It really, breaks the tension. It gets people thinking differently. It opens, minds in tough moments, etc. So I love your example of the Academy Awards, and I think women are less maybe comfortable jumping in with that humor, and it takes a while to do that, but it's such a fantastic technique.
So my example is I was leading a meeting at an organization that I belong to, and the same thing happened where somebody was trying to hijack the meeting. They had some really good points, but they kept on going on and on. And so what I did, which I learned a long time ago, is to acknowledge their expertise, validate their expertise, and say, you raised some very important issue here for us to deliberate on. And I'd like us to come back to this so that we would devote the adequate amount of time so that we can really dig into the meat of what you just raised. And then I just kind of moved it on using body language to the next person. And that's how we were able to get the person off of the mic. So just another strategy that is not using humor. But I wanted to come back to the question of meetings also and talk about in instances where you have the expertise and you're supposed to be the leader, you have the vision, and you have a table that you set up for this meeting. Where you sit at the table is incredibly important.
Interesting.
And so if you have, it doesn't really matter how much expertise you have. If you get to the table and you sit on the side of the table and you kind of lean forward and you are not seated upright, I find that the power is taken away from you. When you're the expert and you're leading the meeting, you need to sit at the head of the table. And you need to be able to look both right and left and in front. You do the right and left, and then you center yourself. And when I say you center yourself, you're centering yourself not just within your chair, but also with your body and your posture. And that's something that we don't do very well as women leaders. And it may sound really trivial, but it completely alters the tone of the meeting.
Very interesting. And it is that being willing to take up space,
Yeah.
and being willing.
Yeah.
Sylvia, I don't know if I remember our last board meeting. You had a story. I'm not sure if you remember the one, but it was something about a photograph. And do you remember that one? I think it was at the Jet Propulsion Lab and a project you were leading. Do you recall that, or is that a vague?
No, I don't remember that particular situation, but I do know, kind of to echo what's been said before, is where you sit in a meeting is very important. And also to really appear composed. A lot of times women come in and think, well, I'll multitask during a meeting, and you come in with just different books, different pieces of paper, and then the men around you don't have that. They have maybe one place to take notes, or their laptop or their iPad. And so you look like you're kind of disheveled and you're trying to disorganized, versus the guy next to you looks very calm, controlled. He's only got one issue to work on.
Okay. I thank you for that. And I wanted to pick up, can you get the screen back on? We lost it, but I wanted to pick up on the level of detail. Sometimes I think that, again, I may be talking in broad strokes, but I think sometimes women in a meeting will talk about a very high level of detail, and I think that sometimes loses the main point. And I think it is a strength that we have, that we can delve into the details and are able to look at that fine-grained perspective, but that doesn't always play well when you're in the meeting and you get lost in the details and not the main point. And I think of that sometimes from a strategic perspective, like what is it, the main thing that you're trying to get across? And I find sometimes I find myself sometimes getting too lost in the detail, which is good for behind the scenes work, but not for the actual meeting. So I am very delighted to see that Liz Fetter has persevered. And Liz, could you introduce yourself? She has just joined us. We had a few technical problems with our first broadcast. Liz, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I am actually on the Alliant University Board of Directors and several other corporate boards, and a 5-time CEO, 3 of public companies and 2 of private companies, a technology executive.
Wow, I didn't actually know you were a 5-time CEO, so it's even more thrilling to have you here. So, Liz, since you just joined, and thank you for persevering with the technology, could you give us some thoughts on the basic idea of how can women learn how to speak up charismatically in meetings? So, what are your thoughts on that, Liz?
Well, that actually is an issue that I have encountered for myself in my career, where I frequently in either board meetings or in other business meetings, I would be talked over or suggest something, and 5 minutes later, someone else, generally a male member of the team, would suggest something, and it would be his idea. All of the common incidents that one hears about, and I have developed a couple of techniques to overcome that. The first is that I employ a sense of humor. So I do recall that in one of the board meetings there was that I was in, I was the chair of the compensation committee, and the chair of the audit committee, a really good guy, would constantly overtalk me, meaning I would be talking and he would just break in and start talking. And so I thought a lot about it, and I decided that the next time that he did that, I was just going to say, please let me finish, or please don't overtalk me. So addressed it relatively directly, and it was a bad habit that he had that he wasn't aware of, that he told me later, and he stopped. So that was one approach that worked for me. Another aspect of communicating in meetings, particularly for women, is many times we're very tentative, and we also can speak with a voice inflection where we raise our voice at the end of a sentence like this, and so what we say doesn't sound firm and declarative. Instead, it sounds like we're asking a question. So I would encourage everyone to listen to themselves talk and understand that and make sure that you're being very direct, very clear, pithy. Don't ramble on and on. Have a very focused thing to say. Say it, and see how that goes.
Very interesting. Liz, that makes me think of something I learned fairly recently, actually, about emails, which is a little off topic but related, getting your point across. And they were making the observation about the word just. And this particular blog was saying, take that out of your vocabulary, the word just in email. Because we lost the screen here, because it sounds tentative. Well, I'm just asking, I'm just checking, and the idea is that it's more like a child saying, well, sorry to interrupt, I'm just asking. So some of these small little aspects of how the voice raising at the end, or your choice of words, or using that questioning tone can really make a difference. And I think I love the word pithy. I aspire to it. I don't know if I achieve it in that way. So
one thing I wanted to say is, first of all, Liz is fantastic at board meetings, and I know you said that's something you've worked at, but boy, let me tell you, I really admire the way that you conduct yourself. When she starts to talk, I mean, it's like everyone listens, and she makes her point and really has an impact. So I really admire how she composes herself in a board meeting. Another thing that I know I've given advice to a lot of women is that we tend to approach meetings and want to build our case on our point. And so it's a reverse pyramid. So instead, what's a lot better is if you think about, what is your point? So start with your point so people know where it is, basically your point of view, and then build the case underneath that. If you don't do that, what they feel is they don't know where you're going, if you're going to ramble, where the discussion's going. It really puts people at ease if they know your point, and then they know, okay, now I'm going to listen for the supporting information after the point has been made. And that makes people feel a little bit more comfortable listening.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I had an experience before Christmas where I went to a meeting, and there was an agenda item which I wasn't aware was on the agenda. And without going into the details, I felt that agenda was a bit of an attack on some things that I was doing, some changes, and I was caught by surprise, and I did the absolute wrong thing, which is I fought back. I guess the fighting Irish came up in me, and I fought back in meeting, and really, I think it was that fight or flight surprise thing. You know, I was really taken off guard. And let me make the point that I feel that that is a strategy in meetings, is to surprise someone with something, because it does throw them off, and it can give you a chance to win your way. So here I was surprised, and I felt that, you know, I had the moral cause, and I was arguing, and I wouldn't let it go. And if I could do a rewind on that, you know, really fighting it out in a meeting in front of others, it, you know, was problematic, and ended up losing support rather than gaining support. Um, so that was something where, you know, I really lost face by fighting back. And you know, meeting is not the place to. I don't know, in my experience at least, if to fight. You know, this is not the hill I want to die on, type of thing. So you know, lesson learned. You know, I could have just been more graceful and said, well, thank you. I wasn't thinking of that perspective. That's very helpful. Let me take that under advisement and get back to you on that. But I just kind of jumped in and tried to defend my point of view.
Well, you know, Liz, you're absolutely right. More times than I care to think about, a lot of women will say, okay, I'm going to use this meeting as a chance to really hammer a point of view, or to make their statement, or put their flag out. And they don't have the support behind them, and maybe they're coming at it without everything kind of lined up behind them, and they feel like, you know, they really want to make an impact at the meeting. And if you haven't lined up the support behind you, there will be a tremendous amount of blowback. So if you're wanting to do something like that, you've got to make sure that you have support in the meeting. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself pretty much alone.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. I mean, in these strategic issues, when you're really trying to make some changes or initiatives, you know, that you need allies. And if you don't have the allies, then you don't. It's not the time to go forward. You know, that footwork has to be done in advance.
Now, I also want to bring up something that women do that actually gives them a lot of power in meeting, which is sometimes we think, well, I'm an executive or I'm moving up. The last thing I want to do is to take notes or to be the person who manages the agenda. And I have found that, especially in an area where I'm new and I don't know the lay of the land, and a lot of people don't want to do that task, I have found that to be an incredibly empowering task, because that lets me have an opportunity before the meeting to meet with the key decision makers. Then I make sure I have the agenda, and then I'm the one that writes up the meeting, and that gives me a lot of power. So for when you're trying to break in and you're not sure of a position, sometimes that's a really good way to make an impact.
Great. And you know, I will say that I like, you know, chairing meetings and running the meeting, because I find the majority of meetings are poorly run, in my opinion. So that's also another opportunity. I recently volunteered to chair a series of meetings, and everybody said, "Well, you're really good at it. Why don't you keep chairing the meeting?" And that way, I know that we can have an effective meeting, because that's one of the hardest things, is to sit through these meetings that are meandering and not well organized. And I find that's common.
I love to
Reminder
chair
to our
meetings.
viewers, if you have questions, don't forget to send the questions our way, so we can have a robust conversation about the issues.
Great. That's helpful. And I see a few questions coming in. Was there a comment? Was that you, Liz?
Yes, I was going to follow up on your point, which is I love to chair meetings for that reason, because I know that it's going to be well organized. I know it's going to be on point, and I hate sitting in meetings that seem like a waste of time with no real outcome. But if one is in that situation, one of the things, you know, there are some techniques to use when chairing a meeting as well. I don't know if you'd be interested in hearing some of the things that are from me. Yeah, one of them is one of the annoyances that I have is when you don't start on time, there's no set agenda, you don't stick to the agenda, all of that. So I'm pretty focused on, and I tell people a few minutes before the meeting, I say, we're going to start on time, get your coffee, you know. And I've been known in times past, particularly when I was CEO, when I would have weekly team meetings and with my executive team. And one day there was the head of IT came in late, like 10 minutes late, with a bagel and coffee, and obviously he'd been spending the 10 minutes getting his breakfast, and which I don't have a problem with people bringing their stuff to the meeting, but I said, in the future, please be on time. He said, well, I had to, I'm hypoglycemic, whatever. And I just said in the meeting, I said, look, you're 45 years old. I think you can manage yourself. Be on time. Just that's it, And in a small group where it's a tight group, you can do that. In a larger group where it's 25 people and a lot of different agendas, it's not that useful to call somebody out like that. But I will ask people to stop having sidebars. People are talking at other ends of the table, a couple of people, which is a violation, meeting violation. So I will just say, please, just one conversation. Or if you must talk, take it outside. I'll just call it out in the meeting, and that people get the message pretty quickly that they're supposed to be good meeting attendees after that. But the delivery of that is very important. Also, the tone, and it just I'm very matter of fact, and I don't I don't stack up stuff over the course of the meeting about people. If they stop the behavior, I'm good. All they have to do is stop doing what they're doing. We'll move on. So tone is very, very important in all kinds of meetings, but particularly when you're running the agenda and trying to move things along and get some resolution.
Excellent. That's very helpful. And I have had that experience, and I would describe it as undermining. That when people start talking and having a side conversation in the meeting, it is, I think, very undermining to the leader. And I call it out.
Disrespectful.
Yeah, it absolutely. And I think it's something that I love your suggestion, Liz, to get on it quickly before the kind of resentment builds, and then you're like so frustrated with the person, but just to do it with humor. And that's one of the biggest takeaways for me on this. And I wanted to touch on something that Sylvia mentioned, and I think we've all had experience with that. I think also Mary was mentioning, and that's this issue of who gets heard, who gets credit. And I think that is a very common experience for women to be in a meeting, and maybe we're the only one, maybe there's only one or two women at the meeting, and we make a point, and that point kind of seems to disappear into the ether. And then a few minutes later, a man will make the same point, and all of a sudden, wow, yeah, that's great. And, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, yes, I think it's Eisenhower who said, it's amazing how much you can get done when you stop worrying about who gets credit for it. So, yes, that's true. We're all trying to get something done, and does it really matter in the end who gets credit for it? But on the other hand, we do know that the deck is stacked against women getting to the positions that all of you have, which are, 5%, Liz, of the CEOs in the country are women. So it is a small number. So that credit becomes, an issue as well. So any thoughts on that when you feel that your ideas just seem to be, not getting traction, and yet others are getting traction for it? And it's an awkward moment in terms of how do you deal with that?
Well, this is Sylvia. So sometimes that's definitely been the case. And what I realize is that's because sometimes we come into a meeting and we think that that's the time to put out new ideas. That's why the pre-meeting stuff is really important. So what will happen is we'll put out that idea, and if the other people, especially the men, see that, hey, it's a good idea, and the boss isn't balking on it, I'm going to jump on it and really add to it, and then by default take credit for it. So I think that's something about preparation that we need to have, that if we've got an idea, to make sure that we'll start soliciting other support for that before the meeting instead of just laying it out there at that meeting.
Yeah, and I agree with Sylvia. I think that is incredibly important. I've seen it happen with both men and women, incidentally, where um, you say something and then the next minute somebody else says it, and it becomes a really big point. And for me, has really been helpful in terms of I just go, wow, Louise, you said it so much better than I did a few minutes ago.
Right.
And if I may, and then I would go ahead and expound on it. I would
Yeah.
reframe it so that the attention is back to me, and then people go, oh yeah, she did say that a few minutes ago. Because it is a really awkward place to be, but if you just let it go, then it really disappears. But confronting it head on, if humor works for you, great. And if not, you should just acknowledge that it did happen. And I agree that the pre-meeting lobbying is absolutely critical in terms of making sure that even if you don't articulate it the same way you articulate it in the pre-meeting, people will remember, your allies will remember that you raised those points with them. And so, having said that, it's really important to come to the meeting with, I call it the three bullet speech. What are the three things I want the audience to come away with as a result of this meeting? And once I narrow down those three, and really it's three bullets, they're not long sentences. And as long as you have your three bullet speech, and you can pitch it right at the beginning, it's really difficult for somebody else to take your idea because you laid it out at the outset.
Excellent. I have a different tact of questions I wanted to, because we covered a lot of interesting things for meetings, and I got a lot of good ideas, especially the humor and the pre-meeting work. Um, and I wanted to talk about facilitating and leading organizational change. And, you know, what are some of, you've all done it. I think we've all done it. And what were some of the things that helped you? What were some stumbling blocks? Can you give us some examples? So, what are some of your thoughts around facilitating and leading organizational change? Because we know that change is threatening to people, threatening to their skill set, their power base, and okay, we're going in a new direction. What does that mean? It creates a lot of anxiety, and it's just hard to move organizations. So, what are some thoughts on how to lead organizational change?
Well, this is Sylvia, and unfortunately, after this, I have to take off. But
Sure.
I, really helping people understand where you want to go and painting a really clear picture and using words to help reframe the situation. Um, Using words like improvement instead of change, because I think people like to improve, but they're kind of hesitant to change themselves. And really, what's in it for them? Really position it as, what benefits them, or in some cases, the benefit is, it mitigates a loss. So helping them understand what it is that you want to do, and being very clear and succinct about it. And you realize you have to repeat. You have to repeat it over and over and over so that people can understand and can clearly articulate, this is why we're doing it, this is why it matters, and this is what your role is in that particular position, in that particular organizational change. Because if you just leave it for people to sort of synthesize for themselves, it's really difficult. You have to help them understand your role as a leader. This is that. Your role as a manager is that. Your role as an individual contributor, this is what we need you to do. And really repeat over and over and help them understand. But I'm sorry I have to sign off, but I really wanted to thank everybody. You've got these amazing women to learn from, and I'm kind of sad not to be able to listen to the rest of it. I'll have to log on to it later, just because they're such experts and they provide such wisdom. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia. And we will certainly have you on future broadcasts now that we've got ourselves launched with this. And in particular, I want to tap into some of your expertise on the STEM disciplines, on the engineering and science and technology, and Silicon Valley. We'll do another one with you and Liz for sure. Thank you for
Great.
making
Thank
time,
you.
Sylvia.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
So facilitating and leading organization change. Any thoughts on that, Liz and Mary? What are some of your thoughts how to do that? We've all done it. Challenging. What works?
Yes, I have done it. In fact, the last 5 companies, the companies that I've run as CEO, all of them have been going through some kind of or needed to go through some kind of change. They were at some kind of an inflection point in their life. So I would agree with everything that Sylvia said. You cannot over communicate. You just cannot over communicate in different ways, both verbally, in person, with through emails, with coming up with easy ways to remember what the new strategy is. All of that. Change happens, especially cultural change happens person by person. It isn't a thing like a new accounting system, that you decide you're going to do it, and you install it, and voila, it's working. It happens person by person. So one of the things I found to be very useful early on, or 2 things actually I would leave you with. One is to do an organizational assessment, or have someone come in from the outside to ask people how they're feeling, and how they feel the business is doing, how they feel they're doing, what their fears are, what their concerns are, what they think is working, and then use that to fashion the program, if you will, or the events going forward, and give people feedback on that. Generally, there will be 3 groups of people who are thinking, finally, someone's recognizing we need to change. Thank goodness, it's overdue. That's, if you're lucky, that's a third. The middle group, which is kind of wondering, a little bit hesitant, but maybe, kind of neutral, but thinking about what's in it for me very strongly. And then the final group that may never move. They're very comfortable where they are. They're very threatened by any kind of change. They don't want to. And so it's really important to identify particularly that first group who are enthusiasts, so that you can use them as little spots of energy across the organization to start the vibration, the new vibration of the change, and the promised land where the organization is going. And we'll start to take on some of the leadership elements along with you.
Excellent. Any thoughts on that, Mary?
Yeah, I completely agree with Liz. I think the other thing, often during times of change or times of transformation in organization, we immediately go, I love organizational development and organizational behavior. So we often go immediately to the nuts and bolts of the change, the technical aspects of the change, what policies need to change, what procedures need to change, and we forget the human resource frame. I love, by the way, Ballman and Deal's book on reframing organizations. And so they have 4 different frames through which they look at organization. For those people that Liz is talking about, the middle group and the first group, it's incredibly important that you pay attention to the rituals, the symbols that kind of have kept the organization tied together, because those will carry you a long way. Some of the things that are not as technical, that really don't pertain to the technical skills or technical outputs of the organization, but a sense of ethos, a sense of the culture of the place, is incredibly important to people. And when people are threatened and they see that going away, it doesn't help them deal very well with periods of ambiguity. Because when we're going through change, there's a lot of ambiguity, and it's incredibly important to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers and that you're working through them, but to acknowledge and validate people's feeling of uncertainty. And that's when the human resource frame becomes really handy. And this is too brief a time for me to go into the human resource frame. but it's the theories of organizations that immediately move us into the structural frame, which is it's the death of your transformational change if you go there and forget the other aspects.
Very, very. Go ahead, Liz.
One of the approaches that I have found to be very effective, to your points about remembering the human elements, because it's all human. I mean, it's there is no we use words like organization and facilitation and transformation, these big long words, and basically it's human beings. You're trying to get human beings to do something different from what they have been doing, right? And to be excited about it, ideally. I have found storytelling to be extremely effective in evoking the emotional elements of how people can make a difference, why it's important that they change, and I've used a number of different things in the past. At one very large company I was at, that I was doing a huge culture change from a very, very calcified culture, was I would talk about head, hands, and heart. And I would say, and it was a part of my very, very frequent communication. But the head is you understand the strategy. The hands is what your role is, what your job is, what we need you to do on the team. And the heart is that you're excited about it and you're enthusiastic and you're giving your all. And so that's not a story per se, but it's a way of explaining to people their engagement. I have some stories that I have used very, very effectively. Stories from other situations in the world, firefighting stories or whatever, renovation stories or home renovation stories or whatever. Along with that, what's really important, I think, is in order to get that emotional engagement is for the people in the organization that you're leading the culture change through, is to see you as a real person. Mm-hmm. And not some suit who's blah blah blah. It sounds like on Charlie Brown that the adults wah 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 wah. Mm-hmm. You start blabbing on about something that isn't. You're not using real words. You're it sounds like you're reading someone's PhD dissertation. Not that there's anything wrong with PhD dissertations, but yeah, but it's it just isn't real. So one thing I have found that really works is to tell my own story or describe what my own role in this culture change that we're in is. I have a job to do too, and by the way, it's going to get better before it gets worse. And some days it's so hard to drag my butt into work because it's a bummer, right? I mean, just really talking to people about as a human being and engaging them in that way, I found to be effective in unlocking their resistance and getting them to kind of say, okay, yeah, wow, Liz, she's a real person, or whatever, and she's doing the best she can, and I am going to too. I want to do that as well. So those are some of the things I found to be very effective.
Yeah, and I think this idea of communicating, I mean, one of the phrases I use is when I'm in leadership positions, I say I prefer over communication to under communication. So, and that could just be my style, but I would rather hear if someone has a doubt or a concern, let me know, and that will be helpful to me. The other thing that I found is that it's kind of the Abraham Lincoln, you can't please all the people all the time, you can please some of the people, I think that one third is a good marker that 1/3 are going to love what you do no matter what you do. They're going to Liz knows what she's doing, Mary knows what she's doing, Louise will follow her, and then 1/3 is going to be on the fence, kind of okay, convince me, and then 1/3 for whatever reason are just, you may never be able to win over that 20% or 30%, and I think it's important. I mean, I think for women, I think that in some ways we're programmed to want everybody to be happy, and that's the emotional work that women do. And you know, I had a student. I lead 2 doctoral programs here at Alliant, and we have a lot of international students. And I was having a conversation with one of our wonderful PhD in leadership students from Jordan, and she was saying, well, you know, Dr. Kelly, people, they don't like this or they don't like that. And it had to do with the quality. You know, I was kind of increasing the quality, which is popular with some people, but not with everybody. And, you know, I said, you know, Muna, it's okay. You know, it's okay if some people are not happy with that. I don't need to be popular with every single person. And I think when you're making change, if you're not making any change, then you maybe have a chance to everybody loves you because you're not, you know, rocking the boat. But that's not the kind of leadership that I embrace. I'm looking for change and innovation to always, you know, improve things. And you're not going to be popular with everybody. And I think to me, looking at leadership, it's not a popularity contest. It's not about that. It's, you know, make a reasoned case and win hearts and minds. And then some people, you're not going to win them over, and that's okay. And to be okay with that, I think, has been something that I've learned to get more comfortable with. So I wanted to, we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask you, some of our listeners are wanting to ranks that you folks are in. And what would be some of your recommendations for improving their professional network? So we've talked a lot about meetings today and how to run meetings. How do you get to the meetings? How do you get involved? How do you network? So, you know, you've had so many wonderful opportunities in Silicon Valley, Liz, and those things maybe didn't come and knock on your door. Maybe you put yourself out in such a way that people knew your talents, your passion, your interests. And the same thing, Mary. How do our listeners today, how do they improve their professional networks? What are some of your advice in that area?
So I cannot underscore the importance of having a mentor. And when I say a mentor, is I really mean somebody that you can let your hair down to. And what I has really worked for me is I have had over the course of my career, I've had a female mentor and a male mentor. And the reason I've had those 2 categories of mentors is because I wanted to learn from either side. And I wanted to learn how to navigate the professional world, but also how to present ideas from both points of view. And those were incredibly important in opening doors to me to other networks that they have that I would not have been able to tap into. And I also made sure that I had both an internal mentor, somebody that I looked up to in the organization, and then an external mentor, somebody that I could go and talk to about things that are happening internally that I could not, you know, for a variety of reasons, talk about, you know, very publicly in terms of helping me grow as a professional. And then just having an open mind and using every opportunity as a learning opportunity. I am not going to be perfect every day. And in every mistake or every initiative that doesn't go well, how do I use the lessons learned to move forward and not just go in the corner and say, oh, okay, I'm going to hang up my boots. This is it. I can't do this. But use it as a mechanism to propel me forward. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll come back if we have more time.
Okay, great. Liz, what would you give as advice for folks to improve their professional network and have the opportunities that you've had, for example, to lead?
Yes, well, I certainly think that I would agree that mentors are very important, and I've had some really important ones in my career. But in addition to that, there are so many opportunities these days, particularly with social media and all of our electronic communications, to stay in touch with people, and also to discover organizations or groups of people who share some kind of interests or agenda. So one of the things that I learned from a male mentor that I had early in my career is, he said, stay in touch with people. Stay in touch with people. And whether that's an annual, holiday card, or whether that's I saw this article and thought of you, thought I'd send it over by email, or whatever. But I have, I am still in touch with people who have, who I worked with 25 years ago, and in 6 or 7 different organizations ago, or different companies ago, and it's amazing how it comes back. People have, they say, I was thinking of you, here's an opportunity or whatever. So that's one thing, is to really stay in touch and treat it as a commitment and a discipline in your professional life. A second thing is to seek out, through LinkedIn, or through other, particularly through LinkedIn. There's so many organizations that, alumni organizations from your schools. There are, interest organizations. There are affinity groups, all kinds of things that you can expand your network, in addition to just the people that you run into naturally in your professional life. And that I have found to be very, very important and useful. And finally, one more tip is, and I got this advice from a life work seminar that I took in 1991. Okay, so it's although it's a long time ago, I think the tips are still very useful. And that is, have a very, very succinct, pithy, not to overuse that word, but a succinct elevator speech about yourself, so that when you're meeting new people, you can, in a couple of sentences, tell them about yourself, and also reinforce your interest in whatever the organization is, or your interest in meeting them, or whatever, something that would tie the two of you together. But it's very important, I think, to think about how you present yourself to people that you know, particularly new people that you know. Say, I'm Liz Fetter. I do, this, and this, and this, and I'm particularly interested, for my next venture, I'm particularly interested in, figuring out how this webcam works, or whatever. Something, and then how about you, on meeting people, and then you hear about them, and always take their card, always put it in your contact file with notes, the whole thing. It's a very, very, it can take some time, but it's a very, very important discipline to implement.
Terrific. Well, we are running out of time here. We have 2 more minutes, and I just wanted to frame what we're doing here with these webinars. Is that so today we're here with the executive board members of the Center for Innovation and Women Leadership. So both Liz and Mary and Sylvia, who was on earlier, are all on our executive board, and they're really forming the strategy for this center to be a center of global impact. And one of the main areas that we're making an impact is through our e-coaching model. And so that's something that you'll be hearing more about, at what we can do for helping women who are at, let's say, for example, middle management level, and who want to get at that executive level, and to be coached by people like Mary, like Liz, like Sylvia, myself, and there's a larger cast of folks who are able to do that coaching with our methodology. So we're going to continue to have these seminars on a monthly basis, and we will definitely have Sylvia, Mary, and Liz back, as we have just scratched the surface of your knowledge base. And one of the things we want to do is have themes that are, women in law, women in Silicon Valley, in these different sort of verticals, these different industries, because they all present their own challenges. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. All our viewers, we're delighted that this worked, and we got ourselves the first horse out of the gate. And stay tuned for further webinars. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All righty. Wow. So we will stop the broadcast here. Thank you.